The system worked this way. The Bank of Canada printed money to buy Government of Canada bonds. The Government of Canada paid the Bank of Canada interest on those bonds. Then the Bank of Canada gave the interest back to the government as dividends, because the government, taxpayers, own it. So the net cost to the government of the money that was created by the bank was near zero. Just the cost of administration deducted. The cash that the government got from the bank was spent into circulation and wound up in the private banks, where it became what the economists called high-powered money. And the high-powered money was a monetary base for private banks to expand their lending capacity and make loans for building factories, buying war bonds, and so on. In effect, the money creation function was shared between the Government of Canada, through the Bank of Canada, and the private banks. That was the system that got us out of the Great Depression, helped finance World War II, helped finance the post-war infrastructure, such as the St. Lawrence Seaway, Trans-Canada Highway, and those huge new air terminals that were built in that period, as well as assisting in the foundation of our great social security system. It was a system that gave us the best 25 years of the 20th century. The system remained in effect until 1974, when the Bank of Canada, along with other central banks, adopted the ideas of Milton Friedman and his colleagues at the University of Chicago. And it has been downhill ever since. In 1974, the Bank of Canada owned about 24% of federal government debt, which was the equivalent of an interest-free loan. In the years that followed, that percentage was brought down to, I think, a low of 4 or 5%. That meant we were forced to borrow on the market at high interest rates. Increasingly, our tax dollars were used to pay the interest, leaving much less for healthcare, education, and other expenses. This sea change in economic theory and policy all had its origins in the ideas of Milton Friedman and his monetary revolution. Monetarist revolution, I guess he called it. He misdiagnosed the cause of the inflation of the 60s and early 70s. He said it was classic inflation, meaning too much money chasing too few goods. Nothing could have been further from the truth. There were lots of goods, except in the rarest of occasions, and the inflation of that period was primarily due to wages rising faster than productivity, cost-push inflation. As a matter of fact, nominal wages rose by a multiple of productivity every year for more than 25 consecutive years. The first time in the history of the world that has ever happened, and I haven't seen one economics book other than my own that has even mentioned the fact. In any event, when Paul Volcker, chairman of the Federal Reserve System, and Gerald Bowie, the governor of the Bank of Canada, adopted his ideas and used high interest rates to crush inflation, the result was the recession of 1981-82. It was the worst recession since the Great Depression. And it proved to be a social disaster. Most of you will probably remember it. Thousands of people put out of work. Thousands of people losing their homes because of the high interest rates. Thousands of people losing their farms and their businesses. Just to give you an idea of how bad it was, I was in the house building business in my youth, seems like youth now, and I built some nice houses in Scarborough that sold for about $15,000. And during that recession, there were people who had bought those houses from others who actually paid more interest on their mortgage in 1 year than the original price of the house. Mm-hmm. Now, if that seems incredible, it should be incredible, but it's actually a fact. So it was also an economic disaster because debt soared. Until 1981, the debt to GDP ratio in the United States and Canada had been flat, more or less flat for 35 years. After that recession, they just started going up like that. And that was the origin of the third world debt crisis, which still exists today. Well, we were just on the point of seeing a ray of hope after about 10 years when Bank of Canada Governor John Crow did it to us again. He induced another recession that lasted well into the 1990s. Quebec economist Pierre Fortin gave it the label of the Great Canadian Slump. The economy slowed down. This led to big deficits, which were rolled over into debt. And this, of course, led to the goods and services tax, which led to a change in government. But it didn't seem to matter which party was in power, either in Canada or in the United States. The ideas of Milton Friedman prevailed. His zero reserve policy meant the virtual deregulation of the banking industry and the adoption of new high-risk products like derivatives and credit default swaps. All of the explosive elements of the pre-1929 era were back in place to give free rein to the worldwide casino that the banking industry had become.